Monsieur le secrétaire d'État, cher Tony Blinken,
Secretary of State, dear Tony
à
Blinken,
Paris.
a warm
C'est la
welcome to
8e fois
Paris. This is your 8th
tu es ici
visit
au Quai d'Orsay.
here at the Quai
Au moment où
d'Orsay,
se termine
Ministry of Foreign
ta mission,
Affairs.
Au secrétariat d'État.
As your mandate
voudrais
as Secretary of State
dire, comme je
come
l'ai
to
fait
an
tout à l'heure
end,
lors de
and
notre
like I
entretien,
said on the occasion of the
tu
meeting
as
we just
incarné,
had, I'd like
le
to tell
visage
you
de
that
l'Amérique que
you
nous aimons.
embodied the face of
L'Amérique
America the way we
au
like
service
it.
de laquelle le jeune
America,
Lafayette
at the service of which
a décidé
young Lafayette
d'apporter
at the
tout son
time
concours en
decided to
s'embarquant à 19
provide
ans
all
seulement
of
sur le
his
navire de la
support
Victoire.
when he joined at the age of 19
au mois de mai dernier sur
a vessel
les
on his
plages
way to
du
victory.
débarquement,
The America
pour
that
nous
we
souvenir
celebrated as well
qu'elle a
in
contribué à
June
venir libérer notre
to
pays.
commemorate
L'Amérique qui, par
D-Day
sa hauteur
in
de vue,
Normandy.
par son
America,
attachement viscéral
which
aux valeurs
thanks
de
to
la liberté,
its
a contribué sur les
views and
décombres de la
values
Seconde
and
Guerre mondiale
attachment to
à
freedom
bâtir avec
contributed
nous un
to
ordre
building on the
international
ashes of the
fondé
Second
sur le
World
droit.
War, an international order based on
Et je veux dire que tout au long de
the
cette
law.
mission
And
qui a
I'd
été la
like to say
tienne,
that during
tu auras
this,
beaucoup accompli
all of this mandate that was yours,
pour
you've done a lot.
contribuer à la
You
résolution d'un certain nombre de
contributed a
crises
great deal
régionales.
to
Et je veux en
solving many
particulier
international
saluer ton action
crises, and I'd like to commend
au Proche-Orient.
your action in the Middle East in particular.
Au Liban notamment,
In Lebanon,
grâce à nos efforts combinés, nous sommes
where,
parvenus
thanks to our combined
à
efforts, we
mettre fin
managed to
aux
put an end
hostilités
to the
avec un accord de
hostilities
cessez-le-feu
with a
mis en
ceasefire
œuvre grâce à un
agreement that's
mécanisme
been implemented
franco-américain qui
thanks
produit
to a
ses effets,
Franco-American
puisque
mechanism, which is
le
yielding
Hezbollah
results,
commence à être
given
désarmé
that
au
Hezbollah
sud
is
du pays
being
et
disarmed
que
in
c'est
the
désormais
south of the
presque un tiers des
country.
troupes
And
israéliennes
now it's almost
qui
one-third of the
se sont
Israeli
repliées, qui ont
forces
quitté
who
le
withdrew
sud du Liban.
from the south
Nous
of
avons combiné
Lebanon.
nos efforts pour
We
faciliter
joined our
l'élection d'un
efforts
président.
to
Cette élection
contribute
aura lieu
to
demain et nous
facilitate
espérons
the election
vivement que
of
cette
a
élection puisse avoir lieu,
president.
de manière à ce
The
que
vote
puisse
will be
advenir
taking
le
place
redressement
tomorrow, and we
politique
very
et
much hope that a
institutionnel
president will
du
be
Liban.
elected in Lebanon so that
Nous avons,
Lebanon can continue
pour l'Ukraine,
with
combiné
its
nos efforts pour apporter
institution
aux
in
Ukrainiens tout le soutien nécessaire
place.
pour qu'ils puissent résister
And
face à
we
l'envahisseur
also work
russe.
together
Et nous
to
partageons
help
un certain
Ukraine
nombre de
resist
convictions simples
the Russian
que
aggressor.
solution ne peut être
And
trouvée à
we
ce
agree
conflit
that no solution
concerne
can be
l'Ukraine
found
comme
to
le
this
souhaitent sans les
conflict
Ukrainiens.
without
Aucune
the
discussion ne peut
Ukrainians.
s'engager sur
There
la
can be
sécurité
no
européenne
discussion
sans les
regarding
Européens. Il n'y a
European security
aucune
without the Europeans,
résolution de cette
and
crise
no
ukrainienne
solution
qui
can
serait
be found
défavorable aux
to
Ukrainiens et
this
qui serait en même temps
crisis if
favorable
the
aux
solution
Européens
were to
et aux
be
Américains. C'est pourquoi que ce soit sur le plan militaire,
not to be in the
sur le plan
interests of
financier,
Ukraine.
sur le plan
So from
des
a
sanctions,
financial point of view,
nous avons
when it comes
depuis
to the
bientôt 3 ans
sanctions for 3 years
apporté
almost now,
à l'Ukraine
we've
ce
been
soutien
providing
dont elle avait tant
Ukraine with
besoin
the support that
pour
it's so
préserver et
much
défendre
needed
sa liberté
to
et son
preserve, to
intégrité
defend
territoriale, bien
its
sûr,
freedom, its territorial
mais pour
integrity,
en
of
même
course, but
temps
also at the
protéger
same
et
time to
défendre
protect and
les intérêts
defend
de
the
sécurité
interests, the
européens.
security interests
Et
of
je voudrais dire,
Europe.
au-delà de tout ce que tu auras
And beyond
accompli
everything
au Proche-Orient
you did in the Middle
pour
East,
l'Ukraine et
for
dans bien d'autres
Ukraine,
théâtres.
and
Nous évoquions
in many other
ensemble la
places.
question du Soudan.
We talked
se
together, for
déroule
example,
aujourd'hui la
about
pire
Sudan,
crise
where there is the
humanitaire du
worst
monde
ongoing
et sur laquelle
humanitarian
nous sommes tous les deux
crisis
très
at the
mobilisés.
moment, and we're
Combien,
both extremely
lorsque je t'ai vu
mobilized
agir,
in this respect.
j'ai vu
But
en
I
toi
could
un
see
diplomate
you act.
accompli,
So
qui
how much of a
s'est
seasoned
mobilisé
diplomat
son
you
humanité
are.
pour éveiller celle de ses interlocuteurs
You are
et qui a
very
su
human,
ainsi obtenir
and
tout au
you
long de ces
know,
années
all over these
énormément
past years,
d'avancées
you
pour
knew
la
how
paix
to
et pour la sécurité.
act and what to do
Alors,
for peace and security
merci pour cette action que
to gain
tu as
ground.
menée.
So
Je
thank
salue
you
au
for
passage,
all of this. Thank you
l'action
for
de
your
ton ambassadrice
actions,
ici à Paris,
and I'd like to commend as
qui,
well the work
elle aussi,
undertaken
quittera ses
by
fonctions
the American
prochainement, la
ambassador
remercions
in Paris.
pour tout ce qu'elle a fait.
She will soon be
Te
leaving Paris, but we'd
souhaiter,
like to thank her
bien
for
sûr, bon vent,
everything she's been
et
doing.
te dire non
I wish
pas
you
adieu,
all
mais
the
plutôt
well,
au
and
revoir,
this is
car
not
je
a
suis
farewell, it
convaincu
is
que
simply
nos
an au
routes
revoir,
se recroiseront.
and we're only saying goodbye because I'm sure we'll be seeing each other very time soon.
Jean-Noël, je veux te dire tout
Jean-Noël,
d'abord à titre personnel
allow me first on a
et
personal
à titre professionnel
basis and on a professional
combien
basis as well to
j'apprécie
tell you
ton partenariat
how deeply
notre
I
amitié
appreciate
et ce que nous
our
avons pu
partnership, our
accomplir
friendship,
ensemble.
and what we've been able to accomplish
Et
together.
je me réjouis du fait que tu
I
continueras à
am
porter le
delighted
drapeau
that you will
dans les mois à
continue
venir
carrying the
sur
torch
ces dossiers
over the next
si
months
importants pour
on
nos deux
these
pays.
crucial
Mais j'ai bénéficié,
issues
moi,
for
d'un collègue
our two
exceptionnel,
countries. I had
Jean-Noël
a
Barrot.
wonderful colleague with
To
you,
the Foreign
Jean-Noël
Minister,
Barrot. Thank you.
to President Macron. I also have to say how grateful I am for the extraordinary partnership that the United States and France have enjoyed these past 4 years that we've been in office. Obviously, a partnership, a fraternity that goes back many, many, many years. I think it's fitting that my last trip as Secretary of State brings me back to France. We know, both of us, that this is a world that we have to face together that is more complex, more competitive, more contested than at any time in recent memory. But we have a shared determination, our two countries, to advance our shared interests and values and to do it together. We have an enduring belief that this partnership is essential to trying to build a world that's a little bit safer, a little bit more secure, a little bit more prosperous for the people in both of our countries and well beyond. As Jean-Noël said, I think we've seen manifestations of that partnership and what it can produce in Lebanon. Together, France and the United States produced a ceasefire in Lebanon that is holding, that's moving forward, and that is creating the possibility for a much different and much better future for the country, as well as for its relationship with Israel. Together, we put together an oversight mechanism to address concerns about ceasefire violations, and it is working. Challenges remain, but so far, the mechanism is functioning well, and we've seen as recently as yesterday now the withdrawal of about more than a third of Israeli forces in Lebanon. I think the ceasefire can be a bridge to a durable peace that allows people on both sides of the border, Israel and Lebanon, to return to their homes, to return to their lives, and to move forward in greater peace and security. In Syria, where Jean-Noël just made a very important visit, along with our friend, the German Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, we see as well genuine hope for the future after 5 decades of an Assad regime that brutalized the Syrian people. Now they have an opportunity for a future that's not under the thumb of a dictator, not under the thumb of a foreign power, not under the thumb of a terrorist group, a future in which a sovereign Syria respects the rights of all of its people, and the country is not used as a base for terrorism or other bad things that we've seen affect people well beyond its borders. So there as well, France and the United States are fully united in what we want to see, what we expect, and the work we're doing to help achieve that. On Ukraine, as Jean-Noël said, France has been, from day one of the staunchest supporters of a free Ukraine, one that can resist and overcome the ongoing aggression that Russia is posing. Global support for Ukraine that France and the United States have helped bring about together is one of the strongest examples I've ever seen of burden sharing. And we see that in particular in France's leadership, from training more than 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers to signing a bilateral security agreement with Ukraine earlier this year, to French firms boosting production to strengthen our transatlantic defense industrial base. I think in the months to come, France's leadership will be essential for ensuring that Ukraine has what it needs to be in the strongest possible position to defend its democratic independence, whether that's on the battlefield or at the negotiating table. One of the things the Foreign Minister and I discussed is the fact that Ukraine is maybe the best example of a proposition that security in Europe is intertwined with security all around the world. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, what is allowing the Russian aggression to continue? Support from North Korea with artillery, with ammunition, and with troops, and everything that China is doing to support Russia's defense industrial base. The machine tools, the microelectronics, all flowing in to Russia from China, from Hong Kong, that are allowing Russia to keep manufacturing weapons, munitions, and other things essential for its ongoing aggression. So that's just a demonstration of, increasingly, the indivisibility of security. The fact that actors far away from Ukraine, from Europe are having a big impact on what is the biggest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. In response, our two countries have worked to deepen Euro-Atlantic and Atlantic-Pacific convergence, notably on the threat posed by the PRC to our shared security and to our shared values. We welcome France's expanded engagement with Indo-Pacific partners and hope it will continue, including by strengthening, for example, freedom of navigation in the region. We've also worked to forge together a common vision for the global economy, one that is governed by rules of the road. We've invested in our collective productive capacity. We've stood up against Chinese overcapacity and unfair trade practices. We've diversified our supply chains to reduce reliance on Beijing. In these and so many other ways, this partnership between us is producing results, results that matter, that will make a difference in the lives of our people. And I'm convinced that in the years to come, our countries will continue to work together and to lead together on the world stage, not out of convenience, not out of charity, but because the challenges we face demand our engagement, demand our partnership, demand our cooperation. We'll confront a changing world as we always have, guided by shared commitment to bring greater freedom, greater opportunity, greater security to the people that we're entrusted to represent. So for that, for the work that we've been able to do together, for the work I know our countries will continue to do together, let me simply say thank you, to share my gratitude, and to share my conviction that when our countries are working in common cause, to common effect, there really is nothing we can't accomplish. Thank you.
Les ministres vont prendre quelques questions.
Ministers will take a few questions.
Thank you. Michael Birnbaum from the Washington Post. Secretary Blinken, I wanted to, we've been on this trip with you. We first went to South Korea, where the former ally, President Yoon, is holed up resisting arrest. We visited Tokyo, where leaders are rather annoyed about the decision on blocking the purchase of U.S. steel. We're here in Paris, where, apologies, but the far right is on the rise. The government is a little chaotic. And we're going to Italy next, where the Prime Minister is close friends with Elon Musk. So I wanted to ask, you've talked about your legacy. You've said that you're handing over a set of alliances that's in better shape than when you inherited it. But looking at this pattern, what would you tell the United States people about the challenged relationships that you're facing? A quick question about Greenland. What did you tell Minister Barrot about Trump's interest in taking over European territory? How worried are you about a conflict between the United States and Europe on that front? And lastly, apologize, Elon Musk, what should US allies make of his eagerness to support far-right leaders in Europe and around the world, given his closeness to President-elect Trump and his global business interests? And Minister Barrot, I just wanted to ask, what is France prepared to do to defend Greenland and Denmark if Trump continues to press forward in his attempt to take over Greenlandic territory? Thank you.
Michael, thank you for covering the waterfront. Let me take these out of order. Greenland first. I think one of the basic propositions we brought to our work over the last 4 years is that we're stronger, we're more effective, we get better results when we're working closely with our allies, not saying or doing things that may alienate them. Having said that, it's the idea expressed about Greenland is obviously not a good one, but maybe more important, it's obviously one that's not going to happen. So we probably shouldn't waste a lot of time talking about it. On the question of where we are with all of our allies and partners, I'd say two things. First, as you've heard me say many times before, what President Biden entrusted me with doing from day one was to re-engage, re-energize, in some cases reimagine these alliances and partnerships, because he and we are convinced that to do what we need to do to advance the interests of the American people, to actually solve this incredible multiplicity, complexity, interconnectedness of challenges that we face, more than at any time in the 32 years I've been doing it, we're so much better off working with others than going it alone. And I think in ways that we've just talked about, we've demonstrated how much more we can get done when we're working closely with our allies and partners. Now, most of the countries that we're working closely with, our base is our democratic base. That doesn't mean that we're not working with countries that don't neatly fit our definition of what a democracy is. The challenges that we face demand that we work with any country that is interested in solving a problem. But we're always starting with our base of fellow democracies. And one of the hallmarks of a democracy, and we talked about this when we were in Korea, is that when we have challenges, when we have issues, including internally, what sets us apart is the fact that we engage them, we confront them, we deal with them directly, we'll deal with them openly, we deal with them transparently, we don't pretend they don't exist, we don't sweep them under the rug, and sometimes that's not particularly pleasant to look at. It can get ugly, it can be painful, but that's exactly what we do. We talked in Korea about the fact that the Koreans are dealing with their own challenge right now, pursuant to their constitution, pursuant to the rule of law, and doing it peacefully. And I fully expect that they will emerge stronger on the other side. With Japan, do we have a difference over a particular business deal? Yes, but seen in the context of the fact that we are each other's largest investors, one deal does not a relationship make. And on the contrary, the partnership, the alliance with Japan is stronger than it's ever been, including economically. Here in Europe, I talked about this already. The work that we've done together with our core allies and partners in support of Ukraine has been nothing short of historic. And also the best example, as I said, of burden sharing that I've ever seen in my 32 years. So I could go down the list, but maybe what's most important is this. As we transition, as we work to hand off to the Trump administration, what I've been animated by these past couple of months is making sure we give them the strongest possible hand to play in dealing with all of these challenges. The world doesn't stop because we have a transition. There are so many things happening in real time that I want to make sure the administration that's coming in is fully prepared to engage from day one. And that's exactly what we're doing and what we've been doing. And it's why I'm continuing my work for these next however many days it is, right until noon on the 20th of January. And I believe in area after area, we're handing off, in some cases, things we haven't been able to complete, but that create real opportunities to move things forward in a better way. In the Middle East, we're very close to a ceasefire and hostage agreement. We've talked about this too in recent days. I hope that we can get it over the line in the time that we have left. But if we don't, then the plan that President Biden put forward for a ceasefire hostage deal will be handed over to the incoming administration. And I believe that when we get that deal, and we'll get it, it'll be on the basis of the plan that President Biden put before the world back in May. We've done an incredible amount of work of what follows a hostage ceasefire agreement in terms of the necessary arrangements for Gaza's security, its administration, its reconstruction, a day-after plan. We talked about this with the foreign minister as well. There, too, we're ready to hand that over to the administration so it can work on it and run with it when the opportunity is there. And more broadly, the work, the investment we've made in transformative arrangements for the Middle East, starting with the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, all of that is ready to go if the opportunity presents itself with a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as understandings on a pathway forward for the Palestinians. So there's tremendous opportunity there. Similarly, with Ukraine, everything we've done to make sure that Ukraine would survive and not only survive, have an opportunity to thrive in the future, is ready to be carried forward. Putin tried to erase Ukraine from the map. He's failed. He's endured, I think, a heavier and heavier strategic setback in everything that he's done in Ukraine. Now we're at a point in the coming year where it may be that the parties will choose to negotiate. We want to make sure, and I think we are making sure, that the incoming administration will be able, if it's going to oversee such a negotiation, to make sure it's doing it from a position of strength, and that President Trump could get the strongest possible deal. I can go down the list, but the point is this. We're handing over a lot of positive opportunities, initiatives, work, and if the next administration chooses to carry it forward, I think that will be clearly in the interests of the United States. Private citizens can, in our country, can say what they want, what they believe, and everyone else can draw their own conclusions and take their own positions on the matter. So I'm not going to comment beyond saying he, like any American, has the right to express his views, his opinions.
Quant à moi, d'abord, je voudrais vous démentir.
As far as I'm concerned, first of all, let me tell you that the French government is working, no matter what is said. And regarding the French foreign policy, its line has been expressed once again very strongly by the President on Monday on the occasion of the meeting of the French ambassadors. Second, the friendship between France and the United States goes back more than 2 centuries ago. I mentioned Lafayette. I talked about D-Day, which President Macron and Biden commemorated together. And I'd like simply to tell you that we survived some 59 American elections, and of course we'll survive the 60th American election. Then let me tell you about Europe and tell you that, remind you where we stand today, where more specifically Tony Blinken and myself are standing. This is exactly here in front of this chimney that some 75 years ago, almost to the day, Robert Schuman made a 90-second statement that launched the political institution on the origins of the European Union. That was on the 9th of May, 1950. At the time, the European Organization for Steel and Coal. So, like Tony, I will put a question to you. Do we believe that the United States will take Greenland? The answer is no. No invasion of Greenland. That being said, are we entering a period of time where the force is present everywhere? The answer is yes. If you look at what Europe's been doing in terms of competitiveness, and in many respects, Europe has been strengthening up. We are expressing who we are. And like once again, President Macron said on Monday, Europe has to wake up and continue to do so.
Bonjour, Emma Barrier pour LCI. Ma première question
Good afternoon. A question from LCI to both of you. What do you make of these expansionist statements made by Donald Trump regarding Canada and Greenland? And could you, and second, what are the American guarantees to provide support to Ukraine beyond January?
I can only repeat what I said a moment ago. Quite frankly, why are we dwelling on this question? It's not going to happen. So let's not waste time discussing it. As far as American U.S. support, what I can tell you is that during the Biden administration, we will continue providing our support to the Ukraine, including during the upcoming days. At the same time,
nous avons un soutien exceptionnel
We have
venant
an
de la part de nos
exceptional
partenaires.
support from our
Pendant
partners
les 2 et quelques années de cette
during
agression russe
the
contre
some
l'Ukraine. Les
2
États-Unis
years
nous avons
of the
apporté,
aggression
à peu
of
près $100
Russia
millions
against
en
Ukraine.
soutien
We've
à l'Ukraine.
brought
Nos
some
amis en
$100
Europe,
million
et au-delà de
of
l'Europe,
support
en
to
Asie,
Ukraine.
150
Our
milliards.
friends from
Voyons là,
Europe and outside in Asia have brought
nos
$150
partenaires
million.
font le nécessaire.
So we know that our partner are doing what needs to be done, and I'm sure that they will continue to do so for the Ukraine.
Messieurs les ministres, une question.
Thank you, ministers. One more question.
Thank you so much. Alex Raffolder from News Agency Tehran. Mr. Secretary, I want to take my chance and follow up on Ukraine again. President Zelensky gave an interview early this week, and he said that, in his view, there can be no meaningful security guarantees for Ukraine if the United States is not part of it. Do you think that Europe alone can do it? And Mr. Foreign Minister, same question but differently. Given the incoming administration's viewpoint, can you see any being there in a coalition of European countries that would be willing to provide guarantees to Ukraine, which will be enough for lasting peace? And or do you just think that willpower is not there? Is America still a key on this? If I may, very quickly follow up on concerns across the continent over Russian interference directly in the election processes in Europe. What can Europe do to better vaccinate, if you want, against that problem? And finally, Mr. Secretary, if I go to you on Georgia. President Macron this week backed the protesters in Tbilisi, and he said that new elections could be a way out of the current political crisis. And they've taken some measures, sanctions, but I want to give you a chance to expand on that. Is there anything that the Western allies can do to save Georgia's democracy? Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. Happy to start. On Ukraine, as we've been very clear, what we've all been working to do is to make sure that as Ukraine engages this year, 2025, it can engage it from a position of strength, whether that means continuing the fight because Russia refuses to stop, or whether it means entering into negotiation to get at least to a ceasefire and maybe beyond. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we'll continue to the very last day of this administration to bring that support forward to Ukraine. I know that our partners will continue well beyond. If there's going to be a negotiation, if there's going to be a ceasefire because we brought it to that point, I think it's going to be critical. And I believe that the incoming administration will want to make sure that they negotiate the best possible deal. And the best possible deal has to be one that builds into it real deterrence against Russia repeating its aggression 6 months, a year, 2 years, you name it. Because here's what we know. Putin has not and will not give up on his imperial ambitions. And if there's a ceasefire, he'll want to try to use the time to rest, to refit, and eventually to reattack. That's why it's absolutely essential that part of this include an effective deterrent against any further aggression by Russia. Now, that can take different forms, including the form of having certain countries police any demarcation or any ceasefire line. And that's something I know that's been discussed and that we talked about today with the foreign minister. The next administration will have to decide, if it comes to that, what role, if any, the United States would play. But again, I believe that the incoming administration, if there's going to be a deal, will want the best possible deal, one that doesn't unravel when Russia sees an opening to reattack. And one way or another, as I said, we need to build into it the necessary deterrence so that that doesn't happen. On Georgia, we talked about this as well, and what both France and the United States have seen is democratic backsliding that's deeply concerning. And not just democratic backsliding, but a retreat away from the aspirations of the overwhelming majority of the Georgian people, the aspiration to build a future that is closer and closer to Europe. So having seen that, that backsliding, having seen a government that's acting in contravention of the clear will of the people that it purports to represent, having seen an election that raised many questions, having seen repressive actions taken by the government about people who are trying to speak freely and openly, we, as well as our partners, have taken action. We sanctioned the leader of the Georgia Dream Party, Ivanishvili, as well as other members of the government. We suspended American assistance to the Georgian government, acting together with almost all of our partners in the OSCE, including France. We invoked the Vienna mechanism through the OSCE to also make clear that the steps that have been taken, including legislation that profoundly squeezes the space for freedom of expression and freedom of action by civil society, that has to change. So I think you see a clear unity of purpose when it comes to the United States, France, many other countries, faced with the very unfortunate actions of the government in Georgia.
Vous m'avez interrogé sur l'Ukraine d'abord.
You asked me about Ukraine first. And in this respect, I would like to underline what Antony Blinken said. If from day one we've been supporting Ukraine, if we said that we would support Ukraine as long as it takes and as much as it takes, it is, first of all, because it is a matter of the future of international law. If we were to accept Ukraine to capitulate, we would we would allow force to prevail. And it is a matter for security for the French people as well as for the Europeans. And in this respect, we should show no complacency, certainly not be naive when it comes to the imperialistic views of Vladimir Putin. And I quote the word used by Tony Blinken in this respect. Why? Because since February 2022, the threat posed by Vladimir Putin has changed. We've seen that Putin's Russia could launch a full-scale invasion, just as they did in Ukraine. It became more international as well. By exporting the conflict to Asia and by involving North Korea as well. And it became hybrid by getting into all fields of the conflict and by attacking even members of the European Union. So like Tony Blinken said, against all of that, our priority is, of course, to support Ukraine and allow Ukraine to, whenever they decide, they choose to do so, to enter negotiations with a strong hand, but also make sure that there is no return of the war on the European continent. It means that on our behalf, on behalf of all of the Europeans, we need to step up our efforts in order to deter the threat from Russia, which is pushing towards the West. Now, disinformation, very quickly, and interference in electoral processes. Here again, Europe's been very clear. In 2022, at the time France was at the head of the European Union Council, we set some very clear rules to be applied to social networks. We applied the regulations on digital services. And I would like you to look at Articles 34, 35 and 36, according to which social networks have to do what it takes to make sure that their discussions on the networks do not represent any threat. They may have to pay fines up to 6% of their turnover. And it's for the European Commission to make sure that these new European regulations are applied. And I'm very much calling upon the Commission to be extremely firm in this respect and very clear. Should the European Commission fail to do so, it would have to turn back to the European members the possibility of acting in their own name. Mathieu Robichaud, Agence France Presse. Turkey is threatening the Kurdish fighters with a military operation. What can France do in this respect and in order to protect them and contribute to stability in Syria? Next, Mr. Minister. Mr. Musk will be joining the American administration in a few days, less than 2 weeks. He referred to Germany and the United Kingdom. Is this appropriate? Well, one can always express their views, but when one is about to join an administration, comments have a specific weight. What you said, these comments are part of a communication process in the context of ongoing electoral campaigns in a number of countries, and this is regrettable. That also could be a reference to some sort of support to a number of far-right parties in Europe, including in Germany, and if so, one has to be extremely careful given what the long-standing positions of the American Republican Party have been regarding the far right. Now, France and the United States of America have been working hand in hand, in particular for 4 years now, to fight Islamic terrorism, including Daesh in Syria. And in this respect, in the presence of Tony Blinken, I would like to express France's condolences to the victims of the terror attack that took place in New Orleans. The Kurds in Syria, for both the United States and France, have been some reliable and resolute allies in the fight against Islamic terrorism. With the fall of the criminal and barbaric regime of Assad, there is no hope for Syria, some fragile hope, but genuine hope. The hope that there will be, that Syria will catch up from a political and economic as well as moral point of view, and that will only happen if all of the communities find a role to play in this respect. And of course, the Kurds of Syria shall have their role to play. We owe it to them. They've been our companions. They've been fighting together with us against Daesh. And it is a matter for the future of Syria. It is extremely important that the Kurds can fully contribute to the future of their country. And I would like to commend the efforts undertaken by Tony Blinken in order to facilitate a mediation between the Kurds in Syria as well as Turkey, and as well the Kurds in Syria and the Authority of Transition. There were discussions with General Masloun only a few days ago. We will continue efforts to that effect so that in the northeast of Syria, and let me remind you that there are thousands of terrorist prisoners kept by the Kurds of Syria. And we want to make sure that, of course, Turkey's security guarantees, which are legitimate, can be met, but as well make sure that the security interests of the Kurds and their right to fully contribute to the future of their country can be
very little to add,
preserved.
I agree entirely with what Jean-Noël has just said. I simply say this. For both of our countries, it is essential, as Syria is navigating this transition, that we keep a lid on the terrorist threat, the enduring terrorist threat posed by ISIS or by Daesh. And as Jean-Noël said, we've seen possibly a manifestation of that threat with the horrific incident in Louisiana, where the individual in question said he was an adherent of Daesh. It shows, unfortunately, the enduring potency of the ideology, but an even more acute danger would be if the more than 10,000 foreign terrorist fighters who are being detained under the vigilance of our Kurdish friends in Syria were to get out and reconstitute the very potent force that was Daesh in Syria, in Iraq, before it was defeated. And this is an enduring American interest as well as a French interest. And it's enduring as well, I believe, with the incoming administration. When Daesh was trying to build its caliphate, its actual physical caliphate, a territorial caliphate, it controlled a huge chunk of land between Iraq and Syria. And that territorial caliphate was undone, was defeated. And that was completed under President Trump's watch during his first term with taking back Raqqa. So I believe that the incoming administration, like this administration, will continue to show a very strong interest in not allowing Daesh to rear its ugly head again, to see a resurgence. And as Jean-Noel said, a critical part of that is making sure that we enable the Syrian Democratic Forces to do the job that they've been doing in the interests of everyone, of securing the foreign terrorist fighters who are there, as we continue to work to repatriate fighters and to repatriate their families to countries of origin. So we've been working very closely as well with our ally, our partner in Turkey, which has very legitimate concerns, of course, about the PKK and about terrorism, to navigate this transition, to navigate it in a way that I think leads to a resolution of many of those concerns, including over time with the integration of the Syrian Democratic Forces into Syrian national forces, including with the departure of foreign members of that force to their own countries, including with a resolution of questions around oil, around borders, etc. But that's a process that's going to take some time. And in the meantime, what is profoundly not in the interest of everything positive we see happening in Syria would be a conflict. And we've worked very hard to make sure that that doesn't happen. We'll continue to do that. And I believe that the incoming administration will do the same thing.